Forget the myths. Hollywood's golden age wasn't just built on curves. Some of the era's most unforgettable stars had the smallest busts in the business, and they didn't let it stop them from stealing every scene. What if everything you thought you knew about old-school glamour is just another illusion? Let's dive into the true stories of Hollywood's tiniest trendsetters, icons who broke the rules and left a mark anyway. Clara Bose. If there was ever a walking contradiction in Hollywood, it was Clara Bose. Here's a girl who rocketed from a rough Brooklyn childhood to silent film stardom, without fitting any of the so-called beauty standards of her time. Her bust measured just 32 inches, the smallest among her superstar peers. But who cared? Certainly not the millions who adored her. Bose won a beauty contest as a teen, and Hollywood never looked back. By the time she starred in the movie It, she became the face of the flapper era. Short hair, reckless energy, and a grin that dared you to underestimate her. She was raw charisma, a superstar who didn't look like the statuesque pinups on movie posters. Behind the scenes, her life was anything but glamorous. She battled family tragedy, industry gossip, and the brutal transition from silent films to talkies. Still, Bose's flame burned bright. 58 films, a tidal wave of fan mail, and a generation of young women who saw themselves in her rebellion. Studios didn't know what to do with her unconventional look, but audiences couldn't get enough. In the end, Bose's story proved something Hollywood never wanted to admit. The smallest package can deliver the biggest punch. Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn didn't just walk onto the Hollywood scene, she floated. With a bust barely above 32 inches, she looked nothing like the hourglass icons of her day. Yet, from the moment she charmed the world in Roman Holiday, Hepburn rewrote the rules of glamour forever. Born into a war-torn Europe, Audrey grew up with hardship and hunger. Maybe that's why her version of beauty was different, understated, almost fragile, but radiating strength from the inside out. When she donned that little black dress in Breakfast at Tiffany's, Hollywood stopped in its tracks. Here was a woman who didn't need to shout for attention. She whispered, and everyone leaned in. Studio heads doubted her at first, fretting about her delicate frame. Costume designers had to scramble for dresses that wouldn't hang loose. But Audrey wasn't bothered. She owned her look, graceful, slender, all poise and presence. Suddenly, every girl wanted to be her, and every magazine wanted her on the cover. Her secret? Authenticity. Hepburn proved you don't have to fit the mold to be unforgettable. With Oscar wins, humanitarian work, and an impact that's still felt today, Audrey's legacy is simple. True style isn't measured in inches, but in confidence. She made the world fall in love with something entirely new. Judy Garland. Think of Judy Garland, and you probably hear Over the Rainbow in your head, her voice soaring, full of longing and hope. What you might not realize, Judy's bust size was just 33 inches. In an industry obsessed with image, she was often told she didn't measure up. Studio bosses pressured her constantly, even giving her pills to keep her weight down and her energy up. But Judy wasn't about to be boxed in by numbers. Judy's story is a classic Hollywood mix of triumph and heartbreak. Plucked from vaudeville obscurity, she became the centerpiece of MGM's biggest musicals. Her emotional power wasn't in her appearance. It was in her ability to make you believe every word she sang. Whether it was The Wizard of Oz, Meet Me in St. Louis, or A Star is Born, Judy's performances electrified audiences and critics alike. Off-camera, things were never easy. She struggled with self-doubt, studio cruelty, and the relentless demands of fame. But on screen, she was magnetic. Her petite figure and youthful innocence made her relatable, not untouchable, a girl next door you could root for. In the end, Garland didn't just survive Hollywood's impossible standards. She defied them, showing the world that heart, talent, and honesty will always outshine a tape measure. That's real stardom. Jane Powell. Jane Powell was the sunshine in every musical she touched, a petite powerhouse with a 33-inch bust and a smile that could light up a soundstage. She started as a singing prodigy, winning talent contests in Oregon before being scooped up by MGM. Hollywood tried to cast her as the innocent, wholesome ingenue, but Jane was never just a pretty face. By her teens, she was already starring in Technicolor classics like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and Royal Wedding. Her roles demanded endless energy, big vocals, and athletic choreography, not curves. That didn't stop fans from adoring her. Powell brought a relatable charm to her characters, and her smaller frame set her apart from Hollywood's parade of glamour queens. When musicals faded out in the late 50s, Jane didn't retreat. She reinvented herself, tackling Broadway, summer stock, even one-woman shows well into her 70s. Powell never let Hollywood's narrow ideals define her worth or her future. She outlasted the trends, proving once again that talent and presence come in every size. In the end, Jane Powell was the ultimate girl next door, bright, spirited, and unforgettable. Constance Bennett. Constance Bennett could walk into a room and own it, no bombshell curves required. With a 33-inch bust, she embodied a different kind of old Hollywood glamour, cool, poised, and razor-sharp. The eldest of the famous Bennett sisters, Constance didn't just break into showbiz, she bulldozed her way in, making her mark in the silent era and beyond. Her early roles showcased her wit and style, and she quickly became a favorite of directors, looking for someone with brains behind the beauty. In hits like Topper and Merrily We Live, Bennett turned sophisticated comedy into her personal playground. She wasn't afraid to take creative risks or shift gears, eventually moving into radio, theater, and even business. Her side hustle? Investing in women's fashion and cosmetics, long before it was trendy. Bennett's smaller frame made her stand out from the statuesque stars of her day. Instead of playing into the typical Hollywood mold, she leaned into her own strengths, timing, intelligence, and an unmistakable aura of independence. By the time she left the screen, Constance Bennett had outlasted her critics and rewritten the rules for what it meant to be a leading lady. Hollywood wanted to put her in a box, but she refused to fit. Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur wasn't the type to steal the spotlight with flashy gowns or headline-grabbing scandals. With a bust measuring just about 33 inches, she had an understated elegance, almost shy, almost ordinary. But the second she opened her mouth, audiences were hooked. Her voice, a mix of husky and sweet, became one of the most recognizable sounds in Hollywood. Arthur started in silent films, always cast as the girl next door or the reliable best friend. But she had ambition. When talkies took over, her quirky delivery and dry wit made her a favorite of directors like Frank Capra. In classics like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, she played women with backbone and brains, often outsmarting the men around her. Her petite, unassuming figure made her characters even more believable. She was never intimidating, just quietly strong. Jean Arthur avoided the typical Hollywood lifestyle, preferring privacy over parties. She was notorious for ducking out of premieres and interviews, adding a layer of mystique to her legend. Her smaller frame and modest style challenged Hollywood's obsession with larger-than-life beauty. In an era obsessed with surface, Jean Arthur's real power was all substance. She proved that the underdog can win, sometimes just by staying true to herself. Katharine Hepburn. When people think of classic movie rebels, they usually imagine leather jackets or wild stunts. Katharine Hepburn rewrote that script with a look as lean and wiry as her spirit, her bust size hovering between 32 and 33 inches. Hepburn's confidence didn't come from curves. It came from sheer force of will and that famously sharp tongue. From the start, Hollywood didn't know what to do with her. She refused to wear makeup, preferred trousers over gowns, and shrugged off gossip like it was yesterday's news. But talent talks, and Hepburn had it in spades. She dominated the screen in Bringing Up Baby, The Philadelphia Story, and The African Queen, winning audiences over with her intelligence and bravado. Critics called her box office poison in the late 30s, but Hepburn didn't flinch. Instead, she roared back, nabbing 4 Oscars and outlasting almost all of her rivals. Her slender frame became a symbol of independence. She didn't care what the studios or anyone thought about her looks. Katharine Hepburn made Hollywood respect her on her own terms. In a world built on conformity, she was the ultimate original, reminding everyone that real star power is about character, not curves. Myrna Loy. You want to talk about cool? Myrna Loy was the ice in every martini, the wink in every inside joke. At just 33 inches, her bust was as understated as her on-screen persona. Always elegant, always composed. Loy made her mark in the Thin Man series as Nora Charles, the clever wife who could match wits with anyone and never missed a punchline. Loy started as an exotic typecast in silent films, but once talkies hit, she shifted gears. Gone were the costumes and mystery. She became the queen of sophisticated comedy, defining the perfect wife for a whole generation of moviegoers. Her roles were rarely about looks. They were about wit, intelligence, and timing. Audiences fell in love with her for the way she bantered, not the way she filled out a dress. Off-screen, Loy was just as impressive. She campaigned for civil rights, took on the Hollywood establishment, and never bought into the idea that beauty meant just one thing. Her slender build set her apart in a sea of bombshells, proving once again that the sharpest minds and most magnetic personalities leave the deepest marks. For Myrna Loy, less was definitely more, and Hollywood was better for it. Leslie Caron. Leslie Caron didn't just bring something different to Hollywood. She practically danced above the cliches. With a bust size right around 33 inches, Caron was never going to be mistaken for a 1950s pinup. But that never stopped her from lighting up the screen with every grand jeté. Born in France and trained as a ballerina, Caron arrived in Hollywood with more grace and poise than any producer knew what to do with. Her big break came when Gene Kelly personally picked her to co-star in An American in Paris. The moment she twirled onto the screen, audiences forgot about old beauty standards. Her petite frame and dancer's build became her signature, elegant, nimble, and completely unique. Caron wasn't loud, but she was unforgettable. She brought a dreamy quality to every role, from Gigi to Lily, winning 2 Academy Award nominations and a BAFTA. Off-screen, Caron was just as bold. She spoke her mind, rejected typecasting, and worked on her own terms, rare for any star, let alone a foreign actress in old Hollywood. Her look, so different from the Hollywood bombshell ideal, helped generations of dancers and dreamers see themselves in her. Leslie Caron showed that sometimes, floating through life with a lighter touch can leave the heaviest impression. Carole Lombard. Carole Lombard was living proof that you didn't need to fit the Hollywood template to win hearts or start a laugh riot. With a bust size in the 33 to 34-inch range, Lombard brought a lean, athletic energy to every screwball comedy she touched. If you think glamour and humor can't mix, you haven't watched Carole steal the show. She was fearless in front of the camera, pulling faces, diving into slapstick, and landing punchlines with a wink. Movies like My Man Godfrey and 20th Century turned her into Hollywood's reigning queen of madcap antics. Directors loved her because she wasn't afraid to get messy, break the fourth wall, or poke fun at her own persona. Audiences adored her, not just for her beauty, but for her honesty and her quick wit. Off-camera, Lombard was equally impressive. She demanded respect from studio bosses, supported war efforts, and never let fame go to her head. Her slightly willowy frame set her apart in a town obsessed with curves, but she made it her trademark. Carole Lombard proved that personality can outshine any statistic and that a spark of originality will always win the day. Her comedy legacy is still making people laugh. Teresa Wright. Teresa Wright wasn't the type to chase headlines or play up to Hollywood's glitz. With a bust size of around 33 inches, she fit the part of the ordinary American girl until she opened her mouth and took over the scene. Wright's strength was in her subtlety. She was a quiet force, the calm in the storm of Golden Age excess. Wright burst onto the big screen with an Oscar nomination in her very first film, The Little Foxes. She followed it with back-to-back hits, Mrs. Miniver, The Best Years of Our Lives, Shadow of a Doubt. Directors and audiences alike quickly realized she brought something special. Genuine emotion, authenticity, and a sense of real-world grit. Her look wasn't flashy, and her wardrobe never upstaged her acting. Instead, her performances lingered long after the credits rolled. What set Teresa apart was her refusal to play by studio rules. She demanded integrity in her contracts and wasn't afraid to turn down roles that didn't feel right, even at the risk of losing her contract. Her smaller frame only enhanced her relatability. She looked like someone you might know, someone real. Teresa Wright's legacy is simple. You don't have to shout to be heard, and you don't need a big frame to leave a giant mark. Simmons. Jean Simmons was never the showiest star in the room, but you could never ignore her. With a bust size hovering around 33 inches, Simmons brought an elegant, reserved beauty that didn't rely on old Hollywood's love of excess. Born in London, she was discovered at 14 and instantly set herself apart, not just for her looks, but for a sincerity that made her performances unforgettable. She broke out with roles in Great Expectations and Hamlet, dazzling British and American audiences alike. Simmons wasn't loud or brash. She was all nuance. When she crossed the Atlantic, she proved she could hold her own in any genre, from historical epics like Spartacus to sweeping musicals like Guys and Dolls. While others tried to fit into a Hollywood mold, Simmons quietly sidestepped the hype, focusing on her craft. It worked. 2 Oscar nominations, an Emmy, and a career that spanned decades. In a world obsessed with surface-level appeal, Simmons showed there's strength in restraint. Her petite frame and calm presence made her stand out without ever needing to shout. She brought an intelligence and depth that demanded attention. Jean Simmons didn't need to play by anyone else's rules. She made Hollywood come to her. That's the mark of a true original. Shirley Mlan. When Shirley Mlan hit Hollywood, nobody quite knew what to make of her. With a bust size around 33 inches, Mlan never tried to pass herself off as a bombshell, and that's exactly why she stood out. She arrived in town with a background in dance, a quick wit, and a stubborn streak that made her a casting director's favorite wildcard. Mclane's breakout came with The Trouble with Harry and Some Came Running, but it was The Apartment that turned her into a household name. Audiences connected with her realness. Mlan didn't try to hide her quirks or play up her figure. Instead, she brought a vulnerability and humor that made every character she played feel lived in. Directors loved her for her risk-taking, her willingness to challenge the script, and her refusal to fit any Hollywood cliché. Off-screen, Mclane's independent streak only grew. She picked roles that pushed boundaries, wrote books, and never shied away from speaking her mind. Her look, slender, athletic, and completely her own, became a new kind of Hollywood ideal. Shirley Mlan reminded everyone that authenticity, not measurements, is what really turns a performer into a legend. Olivia De Havilland. Olivia De Havilland's legacy is pure Hollywood royalty, but her appearance defied the era's typical standards. With a bust size of about 33 inches, she brought a subtle, refined beauty to the screen, one that directors couldn't resist. Cast in classics like Gone with the Wind and The Heiress, De Havilland was rarely the showiest figure in a scene, but she always commanded your attention. Her real power wasn't just in her looks, but in her courage. She famously took on the studio system in a legal fight that reshaped Hollywood contracts forever, winning actors more creative freedom. On screen, she could play sweet ingenues, steely survivors, or clever schemers with equal skill. While others chased headlines and played to type, Olivia relied on her intelligence and craft. Her petite frame helped make her relatable, a woman whose strength came from inside, not from being cast as a typical leading lady. 2 Oscars, a career spanning over 5 decades, and an unbreakable spirit made Olivia De Havilland a model for every actor who followed. She proved that lasting influence isn't built on image alone, but on determination and talent. Joan Fontaine. Joan Fontaine was the very definition of graceful under pressure. With a bust size of about 33 inches, she brought an almost ethereal beauty to the screen, soft, reserved, but with an undeniable edge. Born in Japan to British parents and raised in California, Fontaine entered Hollywood at a time when studios were looking for larger-than-life glamour. Instead, she offered something subtler, a delicate presence with a backbone of steel. Her big break came with Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, where she played the shy, haunted second wife opposite Laurence Olivier. Joan's ability to convey vulnerability made her relatable, and her performance won her an Academy Award nomination. She followed it up with Suspicion, also directed by Hitchcock, earning her an Oscar, the only actress to win for a Hitchcock film. Despite her slight frame, Fontaine filled every scene with quiet intensity. Off-camera, Joan's career was famously entangled with her sister, Olivia De Havilland. Their rivalry became legendary, but Fontaine refused to let it define her. She built her own legacy, starring in more than 30 films and earning a reputation for professionalism and grace. Her appearance didn't fit the bombshell mold, but audiences and critics alike responded to her authenticity. In a business built on facades, Joan Fontaine's subtlety and depth made her unforgettable. She proved that the softest voices sometimes carry the farthest and the smallest frame can deliver the biggest punch. So there you have it, 15 legends who flipped the script on Hollywood's so-called beauty standards, proving that real star power is about presence, not measurements. Maybe it's time we all stop measuring greatness with a tape. Which of these stars surprised you most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe for more deep dives, and share this with anyone who thinks old Hollywood was all about the same old mold. After all, the real legends are the ones who break it.